We're going to, do we have a trip to Costa Rica, potentially? Or a trip to the B12 universe?
Oh, we do have the B12.
Someone's Lama?
Yeah.
So, B'siyata D'Shmaya, we're here in Likutei Moharan, and we are learning about Machloikis. We're in Samech Aleph. In the English edition, it is on page 244. So it says, Mikol Machloikis Nasa Sefer. 244. We're speaking about the idea of Machloikis. And we're speaking about that Machloikis, why does fighting happen? So we're getting Rabbi Nachman's perspective that fighting can happen for certain reasons. To bring about tshuva. That a person should do tshuva. Why is somebody making problems and starting up with you? So we're going to learn that if a person is really a tzaddik, there should be no reason that people are starting up with them. There's other reasons why a tzaddik might have people who start up with him, which we'll get to later. When we get to Isaiah 53, which he brings over here. That's the big one. Sometimes when you're giving a shir, all of a sudden you get like Isaiah 53, Isaiah 53. Like Rabbi Nachman's about to bring Isaiah 53. So we'll see why there's such a thing that a tzaddik has challenges. But really it should be that if you're going on the straight path, if you're going in a pure, good way, there's no need for somebody to make machloikas with you. Because the whole machloikas is there to arouse tshuva. Is there to arouse that maybe there's something that I could be doing better in my life. So let's get more into the technology, how this works. So in 244 it begins, Ki mikol machloikas nasa sefer. Every single machloikas makes a book. What kind of book does it make? What are the books that are being generated here? It's nice to see all the Chevra from all over the world. Oklahoma, welcome. What is the book that is being generated by Machloikas? The book that's being generated by Machloikas, when there's a, Machloikas means an argument. I'm cholek, means I disagree with you. The book that's generated is that when somebody disagrees with you and then you respond to them, you're listening to what they said, and then you're responding. So now there's at least a dialogue happening. And dialogue is very, very important. So that's the sefer that's being written. Ki machloikas is sheila v'kushya. Machloikas is that there's something that's brought up, there's questions, there's difficulties, and then there's responsa. Shemakshin v'shoylin Allah, that people are asking questions, v'hu shabbat shuva, and he's doing shuva. Through this, he's responding. He's responding to the haters. He's responding to the claims. But there's at least now dialogue happening. What's the sefer shut? It means shilas for tshuvas. And through that, many svarim are created. Page 246. So what's happening here? Let's go back to the beginning of the Torah. Through emunas chachamim, which means having a deep connection to the Masorah. That's how this whole Torah began. Man, this is one of these mega Torahs. These like gigantic Torahs. Rav Nachman. There's a lot of moving parts in it, and you want to see the whole universe of the Torahs. Thank you, Natan Ezra, HaKohen. So, in this giant Torah here, everything began with Emunas Chacham, being connected to the tzaddikim. When I'm connected to the tzaddikim, then Yechim Lahitzi Mishpatein La'or. Then my decision making could be going in a pure and good way. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. We're in the Shahakal. And we said that if a person goes away from the Chachamim, then he's splintering off. The idea is being connected to the Masorah, which is Moshe Kibel Torah Messina, Masorah Yeshua, Yeshua Zakanim, Zakanim Levim, Levim Masorah, Yanchek Knesset Gedola. Got a little stash. La'anchek Knesset Gedola, and they passed it all the way down to us. And we're going to pass it down to our children, Mirz Hashem, and to our children's children. And Bias Koyel Tzedek, Bimher V'Yemenu Amen, Bezrat Hashem. So, once we could do that we're going in the straight path. So then after we do that, then we understand that all of life is about being in this straight path. All of life is about seeing things in a clear way. As opposed to not, we said that's Tzoyer Roi Sachas, etc. Then we went into Ois Beis. And then we said that we have to be very, very careful to make sure that we don't give power to those that are outside of the Masorah. And to make sure to give power to those that are connected all the way back to Har Sinai. And not to give smicha. And then we went so far as to explain how it's strengthening Ksav Yodam. It's strengthening and taking energy away from the writings of the tzaddikim if we give energy to that which is outside the Masorah. Amen. And then we explained that really by doing this, by being connected to Masorah, we get what's called the Soid HaIber, which is the greatest secrets that were revealed to Klal Yisrael. And this was the area where the nations of the world would see the greatness of the Jewish people, which is called Ki hi chachmaschem, pasuk in Devarim, ubinaschem le'einei ho'amin, that the eyes of the world will see that the Jewish nation has a special mission and a special gift to help humanity. But it has to be that we're connected to the Masorah in order to have that energy flowing into the system. Then we went into quite an extensive journey into what the Soida Ibr is, and understanding the months and the relationship of us to time. And we spoke about goal setting, and that was a very long section. And then now we said that even if a person got thrown off course, they can get back by this purifying water. And the purifying water we mentioned last time is the Maim Tahirim, V'zarakti Aleichem Maim Tahirim, that just like if something becomes lost from its source, a diamond that's filled with mud, the diamond will call the Masorah, the mud is that which is outside, is external. As long as you soak it in water, as long as you spritz it, as long as you put it into a mikveh, it could regain connection with its essence. And we said that's the idea of the mayim of Meimeriba, the mayim of Machloikas, which is a fascinating thing, because generally we think Machloikas is a bad thing, which it is. So here we have to kind of get deeper into Reb Nachman's mind, because Machloikas here seems to come out as a good thing. What's the good thing about Machloikas? Well, let's start it this way. The Machloikas would never have started if you were in the Masorah. The fact that you left the Masorah, now Machloikas will help bring you back in. How is that? Because somebody starts asking a question on you. You know, maybe like Shabbos is a chashuv thing, you know what I'm saying? Maybe driving to shul, we could talk about it. Maybe it's a discussion. Can we have a discussion about it? What are your thoughts on it? So before that, it wasn't even a machloikas. It was, I don't drive, I drive. Don't mess with me. There's nothing to talk about. It's not even on the table. All those books books on the shelf that seem to tell me that you don't drive. I'm not even goyrist them. I don't even put them into my consciousness. As soon as though there's a mach, so that's even before machlokes. Once there's a machlokes, now you're actually hearing that perspective, that maybe there's another opinion in the matter. Once there's another opinion in the matter, and I'm dealing with that, and I'm responding to that, there's books that are being made. What are the books? My responsa, my feelings and my thoughts of what's being presented. A very dear friend of Benjamin Kaufman. He's a very chashuv person. So, if you guys know Rav Aviner, is a big rabbi in the Dati Lumi world, and he wrote an idea about being Haredi and some of the inner turmoil that he feels goes on in the mind of the Haredi person. And then my friend Benjamin Kaufman wrote him a response about his feelings about what he proposed. And it was so beautiful to see, because it was taking the words, it was hearing them, but then it was respectfully disagreeing, but pointing out where he agreed, pointing out where there was disagreement, and then Rav Aviner can make a response to his response. And now all of a sudden you have Torah Shabbal Peh. You have the opening up. You have the opening up of real world views, but in such a beautiful way. Not a fighting way, but in a real respectful way. Yes?
So I only started, I would say, like in-depth learning the halacha in the last year. And I would say in my time, I found like amongst a lot of Jews that like they're doing things that from like what I see is totally like either totally not okay or like 95% not okay. And I go through the whole sugya, I try to go through the whole sugya, I try to master everything. Sometimes people hear me out, sometimes I write something, people respond. Other times people are like, who are you? You're 19 years old. You haven't achieved anything. So much so that even if I can make logical arguments, who are you? You're 19 years old. Leave it to the Gedolim.
There is something to be said, so let's add on to that. Now we're in Torah Shabbal Peh right now. Or Nasa Sefer. So there is something to be said that a person through years of wisdom has more das. Arbaim Labina, when you get 40, you have certain understanding of things. Before then, there's just a lack. That's why you stand up for a person who's old, even if he's not a Talmud Chacham, because just life experience makes a person aware of certain things of how the world works. So there is something to be said about age, but at the end of the day, there were very wise halachic authorities that were very young. That being said, if ever you could see and try to find a limit schus, if ever you could try to find merit in what somebody's doing, it's a very good thing. By Rav Tzvi Meyer, they have a halacha, a little pamphlet that goes out every week. It's called Bei Medrasha. It's literally amazing, in-depth, into sugyas, all the shitas. And I was always so impressed that the last part of this publication, it says, Al ma heim lismoich. On what do the Jews depend on that they're doing such a thing? Like opening bottle caps on Shabbos, or things that like everybody knows is kind of shilas. So can we be malamed schus upon them? You know, tapping on Shabbos, what about that one? Or dancing on Shabbos. What is it that they're relying upon that we don't have to come down on them with like picketing with signs and protesting? Like in the mirror we had the Bereka, with the Bereka Kanaim, the Bereka Zealots, that if Berekas came out, so they would come with signs. If you have 2 Berekas, you wash and bench. 2 Berekas, wash and bench. Like picketing, mamish, making sure everybody knows, like, you're benching. The Bereka Kanaim. Or the little pizza roll kanaim, like with the olives in there, the little pizza, little pastry things. Benching. So, or the schnitzel kanaim. Mezainis. What, a shahako's not okay? Mezainis. So, can I find the limit schus for them?
You always can.
Can you?
if they're Yirav Shamayim, I feel like there's always at least a Da Yachi that they're relying on or something like that.
That's a good thing. So maybe when somebody's relying upon something that has credible source, to try to help them. I don't have to scold them, but to see, okay, they're going somewhere. Maybe we could talk more about what the difference between a Das Yochid is, Echad v'Rabbim, Halacha K'Rabbim, that we go with the Rabbim in Halacha. Yeah.
So, you're saying Machlokas in our terms, but when we look at the Gemara and we see that there are two different Rabbanim who hold two different Shitas, they're both emes.
Yes.
So, what does that mean? Is there Machlokas if they're both emes? And is the Machlokas just realizing that each other's Shitas are emes? Or what's, because in our case, with the case of the Yehu, driving on Shabbos, that's obviously not emes. In the case of the Gemara, it is. So how do we reconcile Machlokas from here
So,
to there?
but maybe what I could do is I could try to see from his vantage point and his worldview where he's coming from, that for him, is there anything that makes sense from where he's coming from? Meaning to say, this is the whole beginning of the Torah, is that loy sasa liyamin l'smal, is that the tzaddik, the one in the Masorah, the Amunas Chachamim, takes the yamin and takes the small and comes into the middle path and says, I hear where you're coming from, I hear where this is coming from, bless you, and let's find a middle path. So for example, the person driving on Shabbos, if all he ever heard his whole life is Asr, Asr, so he's not even like listening to that voice anymore, likely. But if somebody comes to him and says, I hear where you're coming from, that you want to come to synagogue, and for you, maybe you only live 5 miles away, I could hear that, and all of a sudden he feels heard. Wow, I never had, any person, of any rabbinic authority that spoke to me in such a way. And he says, but can you also hear that when the Torah says, Lo yisavaro eish, b'chol moishvei seichem, b'yoyim HaShabbos, do not light a fire on Shabbos, that what's going on in the engine of the car is a bunch of fires. Yeah, but I drive a Tesla. Okay, fine. We could talk about that. Okay, there's something called a dirabanan, or Chazanish, that even creating an electric circuit is a deraisa, it's boine. And you all of a sudden show that there's a dialogue that could be had here, and you can come into the middle path. So here, the Rebbe is talking about that the shilas and shuvas is opening up dialogue. And a person, once he's even in the conversation, he's in a dialogue, now there's an opportunity for tshuva. Before there's even a dialogue, there's no tshuva. Once he's in a dialogue, there's tshuva. Yeah?
I wanted to say something actually. When I was in Neighbor, there were children taking their scooters. So there was a car driving by, there were children taking their scooters, throwing it at a car saying, Shabbos.
I'm not, it's going to help so much. It might be.
It's the wrong kind
I mean, they're children, they don't know better.
It's not Machlokas, it's L'Shem Shamayim.
That's right. I don't think it's going to help. But for you not to feel anything in your heart of Shabbos, a tzaddik one time told me something that really changed my perspective of Shabbos, is that he said, where did that start? You think that started in this generation? It started because we'll call him Chaim. Okay, Chaim lived in Volozhin, and he had a friend named Yankel, also lived in Volozhin. And they sat on the same benkel, they sat on the same bench, learning Torah. And Chaim and Yankel knew Torah, we went through Shas together. And then Chaim and Yankel both came to the Holy Land. In 48. Except that Chaim came to be connected to the Holy Land with Tzaddikim, with the Masorah, with the Amunas Chachamim. And Yanko changed the name to Jacko. He really came to be part of the secular settling of the land. And he got swept up in the fervor of secular Zionism. And fast forward 10 years, and Chaim and Yankel didn't see each other. All of a sudden, Chaim sees his buddy Yankel on his donkey or something, or in his car, whatever, on Shabbos. So Chaim says to Yankel, Shabbos, you know better. We sat on the same bench in Volozhin. We went through Shas together. You know better. I could yell at you because I know you. And when you really know somebody, you could give them a bit of a, you know better than this. You know better than this. If your best friend is going out to some nightclub and you know he knows better, you could give him a bit of a yelling. You know him and he respects you. But what happened? You know who was there when Chaim said to Yankel, Shabbos? Chaim's kids were there. So they saw this. Oh, I guess you yell Shabbos. So then Chaim's kids started yelling Shabbos. But they started yelling Shabbos. Maybe people that their father knew, maybe people not. But then Chaim's kids started yelling Shabbos. And now, nobody knows anybody. They're just yelling Shabbos. So where it was maybe effective in the beginning, now I don't think that it's getting the message across. However, for us to not feel that in the Holy Land, that there's in Hashem's home, where he says that Shabbos, certainly in the palace of the king, this is where that stakes are much higher. That there should be the breaking of Shabbos, that there should be buses in Tel Aviv on Shabbos. This can't be. You should feel Shabbos. It can't be. This is the home of Hashem, which should be set up by the great king, King David. This is the home that David HaMelech is going to set up the ultimate Malchus of this land, which is a Torah Malchus. Yes, Yosef.
As far as machlokes between Zionism and Torah Judaism, I've experienced machlokes L'Shem Shemayim, like the example you initially gave of that back and forth. Like I've seen, I went to go listen to a Holy Chashiv Brisker Rav talking about the WZO, and he was giving a drasha about how maybe his convent shouldn't get involved. And I spoke to him afterwards, and I said, "Oh, Anish, we're getting involved." And he said, "Your Rosh Hashiva is a tzaddik." He says, "Do as he says." He could acknowledge that there are 70 faces to Torah, and that you could both be right, coming from different perspectives. But I've also experienced on the other end, people saying, like, "Oh, you ultra-Orthodox, ultra-Haredi, like this wasn't so L'Shem Shemayim." And I was wondering how, just being here in Israel, I didn't realize how divided we were as a people. Like, how do we deal with healing the divide?
Just seeing the good in each other. Just see the good. See the good in every single person. Hear people's perspectives, and then instead of coming to ad hominems, actually respond to the points that are being made, and be able to have a discussion about it. Yeah.
When I try to articulate this as best I can,
Go for it.
how does the relativity of one's own reality come into play when influencing these things that we're talking about, seeing the good in someone, and someone hasn't brought into their consciousness such depths? So maybe could one say that until they climb the ladder at each level, those rules don't necessarily affect them in as negative a way as it might affect a knowing person, or is that not true? Is it really affecting them so negatively, and they must change their ways right now?
No, we have a concept called Tinuk Shenishma. Tinuk Shenishma means somebody who was taken into captivity. Moshe Mowgli. You heard of the Jungle Book? So Mowgli. So Moshe Mowgli. That's all right. So what? So you think that? I'm saying, well, we made him into Moshe Mowgli. So you think that? Let's say Mowgli was actually Moshe Mowgli, and he was dropped off there by Chaya Freda and whatever, and she got separated from his mother and whatever, and now 120 years passes, and he comes up to Shemayim, and they're like, "So Moshe, what's with tefillin?" No. She's like, I'm Moshe Mowgli, you know. I know Moshe is who I am in my neshama, but what did I know? I had no idea. So that's called the tinuk shenishba, like a child that was taken into captivity is not going to be held culpable for it. Because what did they know? How could they have known? How could they have known? However, if some Chabadnik came into the jungle and was like, Mowgli, tefillin? So what's called knowing is really a deep sugya, because I think many people have no idea. And I think more because the cognitive bias of our generation, and because the gaslighting of the media, and because you come in at age even 13, let's call it, to bar mitzvah, to bas mitzvah, and if you've had a device, you've seen and you've imbibed so much. You have such a cognitive bias of how to see the world that you might not even be able to receive another way of seeing the world called Shabbos, called tefillin. So it could be that you're also like a trapped person. Even though I'm a free man, what do you mean? I'm not sure. So how culpable a person is, these are very deep questions. These are deep questions. Were there opportunities that Hashem sent them to know better? Generally, Hashem is always sending opportunities. So it's very hard to judge. At the same time, though, because we're not Hashem, we have the Torah that guides us what to do, and there's a mitzvah called to give teichacha, and to be able to help. But that's only really when you think that the message is going to get across. And you have to really evaluate that. Do you really think you're going to be able to get across? And sometimes you have to be very creative about this. I think generally in our generation, people used to be much, I think, more powerful with their ability to withstand. Like, I want to change my ways, I want to be better. Nowadays, we're very fragile, generally. I think the best way, if you want to get somebody to change anything, and you think it's actually going to help them, you need to take them out for a fancy steak dinner, prime cut, in the city, with expensive wine, with one of those chocolate lava desserts. And at the end of the evening, you gently say something like, oh, like I one time was speaking to a guy, like not even him, and we were talking about the halachas of nefilas apayim, when you go down like that, and he didn't realize that, you're not supposed to go down on your arm, on bare skin. You're always supposed to go down on a garment. And now you know that this guy goes down mamish on his bare skin, he doesn't realize. He also doesn't pull like that. If he goes with short sleeves, and you pull like that. Or your watch face, also going down on the bezel also works, not a problem. So, and you got it in there, and all of a sudden you saw, he recalibrated, after all that wine and steak and lava dessert. I think generally that's how you have to do it nowadays, is because it's hard. We're not, unless you're somebody who's mamish at a very high spiritual level like Yosef, who comes over to me and just says, give me Musar, just give me Musar, which I highly respect. Otherwise, generally in a challenging, weaker generation, you have to mamish. So it's hard, it's really hard. But the ultimate is that all of us stood at Mount Sinai, and we all heard Hashem say, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and Lo Yeh Lecha Elohim Acharim Al Panai, and we heard Taryag mitzvahs, and we have a Torah, and it's given to all of us to keep the 613. But you have to be a chacham how we do this. How we do this. Yeah, Hanan.
So this is an interesting point you brought up about kind of being a commentary on the fact that this generation has a really tough time handling Musar and handling any kind of criticism or differing opinions on that. What do you attribute to the inability to take criticism, and what do you think our generation is lacking?
I think what our generation is lacking is self-confidence. Believing in oneself, actually having a healthy self-identity. Because if you know that you're a neshama, so if somebody says something to you, why are you shaken? If they give you some piece of musar, why does that shake you? To the contrary, it invigorates you. I could be close, if you're trying to guide me in halacha, so now I'm closer based on what you just shared with me. And If it's something that that you feel, if somehow you're just yelling at me, so why am I shaken by that? I'm a neshama. It's just like water off a duck's back. But I think the lack of real core self-awareness creates such a problem with receiving teichacha. Everything is like, we take everything personally. What the Baal Shem Tov came to bring to the world, and really the Torah of all of Chassidus, and the Bali Musar do this also, but they do it kind of in their own way, is really building up the human stature once again. And the ultimate human stature is knowing that I am a soul. And as a soul, you are big and confident, and you're humble at the same time, and your soul spans all the way to the heavens. So you feel very elevated. So I think the more that we reacquaint the person with their neshama, the more that people will be so much welcoming personal development. Just on Adam's point also, we also have a mitzvah that the Torah says called b'tzedek tishpot amisecha, that you have to judge people favorably. You have a mitzvah to judge favorably. So even if you see somebody doing something, if you know who that guy is, as generally a good guy, but you seem to have seen a situation that didn't look like so kosher, you have to judge that it was kosher. You have a mitzvah to judge him favorably and be able to think about in your mind, it was probably because of X, Y, or Z. That a person like that probably doesn't do that. You have a mitzvah to do that. In fact, an obligation to do that. If he's generally a good guy. The Rosh Hashiva spoke about this. So you put that whole sugya together. So what do you have? You have b'tzedek tishpot amisecha. If I see somebody doing something, they probably not, they don't mean it. They probably don't know. He's generally a good guy. I have the sugya coming together of that I do have an obligation to help. At the same time, I can only give musar to the degree that I think the person can handle it. We have now Rabbi Nachman teaching us through Emunas Chachamim, is that Emunas Chachamim means I take the opinions on the right, I take the opinions on the left. I'm not an extremist. I try to find a balanced path. How could I hear out the person who's presenting that he wants to drive to shul on Shabbos? Where is he coming from? And if he could just hear my point of view and feel heard, this is the kind of machlekes we're talking about. The Reb Nachman saying is that you start writing books, you start creating dialogue between those people, and that creates the tshuva. Because before the machlekes, before the dialogue, there's not even what's called being goyrus. So you have all these opinions, and nobody's even listening to them. Once now you hear the opinion, now there's response to those opinions. So let's just see a little bit more inside. There's many books now, Reb Nachman says. There will be many more books that will be written. The people of the book. We love books. We love Sfarim. We have many halachas regarding Sfarim. You can't put a sefer on the floor. You can't even sit on the same level as a sefer. We kiss our Sfarim. We kiss our Sfarim. So sometimes people say, Rabbi, what do you say about davening from a phone? Are you okay with that? So, I used to think, you know what, like, I don't know, like, when you finish davening from a siddur, you kiss the siddur. When you finish davening mincha from your phone, you don't usually kiss your phone. Unless you do. And I'll let you think if you feel that that's like, if that energetically feels like a good move. You kiss the sefer, but you kiss our siddur, we kiss our phone. But then I heard Rav Moshe Weinberger say something beautiful. He said, you know what? I have no problem. Guys davening from the phones. Because a guy who's mamish davening from a phone, and he's on his phone the whole day, and he's still davening mincha, what a tzaddik. Unbelievable. That's what a high darga. That's unbelievable. He's davening. Psh, beautiful. Yeah.
So would you say then, like, davening from a phone is it's like a levels thing? Because I whenever I'm thinking about davening from a phone, I'm thinking about all of the power for bad that this thing contains in it, and like, how are you like elevating the words on a device that literally has the capability for like such destruction as well?
But doesn't that which has the biggest capability of destruction also the biggest capability of good?
I believe so, but it's like playing with fire. I still feel a bit uncomfortable. I still feel a bit uncomfortable. I like kissing my siddur afterwards. And my phone's also not smart enough to be able to handle it. It doesn't have, it just has like calls. So I feel that there's something that just energetically it's hard for me to do. But if a person does, I think it's fine. And in a certain way, like Rav Moshe Weinberg said, it's awesome. It's awesome. You're still davening? Are there dargas? There's always dargas, Adam. There's always dargas of us growing more and more. So there's going to be many, many more svarim. V'kulam tzrichim la'oy. Look at that. All these books are needed for the world. So one explanation, why are all these books? There's svarim being written all the time. So one explanation of that is because each sefer that's written has an address. Each sefer that's written has an address of somebody that will relate to that author's way of seeing the world, that when I read that sefer, when I pick up that little booklet, it will arouse me to tshuva. It will speak to me personally. And as more svarim come out, there's going to be more ways of seeing the world that I'll be able to relate to. Before a person had emunas chachamim, all the books didn't even speak to me. They were just those dusted books on the shelf. I didn't even connect myself to it. You ever go, like, when you were little, into a synagogue and just see all these books? And you're like, I have no shaykhs to that. It's like another, it's not me. It's just not, I have no connection at all. And all of a sudden what happens, you start getting more into emunas chachamim. All of a sudden you go on the shelf, the book that are the same ones, the dusty ones that are in my same synagogue that I had growing up, all of a sudden you're like, is that a Gemara Ksubis over there? Ketubot? In my local synagogue? That's pretty, I relate to that right now. Rashi? You have a Chumash Rashi? This is unbelievable. I love Rashi. It was always there. So before I had emunas chachamim, it sat there and there wasn't even there was nothing. As soon as I have emunas chachamim, now they're like speaking to me one at a time. I remember when I started to get into Chassidus. So all of a sudden, every book on the shelf, I was like, I learned Tanya. And all of a sudden, Tanya is like jumping off the shelf. And then I heard about another tzaddik. The Oiv Yisrael is jumping off the shelf. Then more Orva Shemesh. Then more Einayim. Tosha Rebbe. Everything's just jumping off the shelf. Now all of a sudden they're speaking to me in ways that I never even heard before.
Wow.
Rabbi, how are you supposed to, bring this machlokas l'shem shamayim and open someone up and judge them favorably and all these things, when at some point, like, the line has to be drawn in the sand? Like, someone has to understand that, like, as much beautiful spiritual things they're talking about, like, if they're still going to the Reform shul down the street, like, that's like actively a negative thing for them.
So will your message get through? Will your message get through? And sometimes you have to play the long game. The long game, sometimes we like being like short game, like right now. Right now. The long game is, I stay in touch with them. I invite them over a little bit. You have to be careful that you don't think it's going to damage you. But let's say that you developed enough confidence in who you are and your shitas are clear and you have connection to authentic Torah, emunas chacham, you're connected to the Masorah. And then you invite them for a nice minyan with you in a way that you think they'll relate to, for a Shabbos Suda. And it's slowly but surely, you feel that you have a long game perspective that's relatable, then I think that's the best way to do it. It's all about the long game. If you think it can get through in the short game, that the person's confident enough to hear it, then fine. But try to hear them out also. Hear them out. Let dialogue really be that you hear what they're saying. Nachman's really bringing out that the whole that we're dealing with here is that before there's machlokas, I'm just disconnected. Then there's discussion. That I could hear where you're coming from. I could disagree, but I'm sharing my points. But you're doing it in a way that they could hear the points. And you're hearing their points.
How do you know when you're at the Madrid to start going out and making yourself vulnerable to other people and to the outside world? Because one of the criticisms you often hear of the Haredi world is that it's so insular and that they don't expose themselves so much to the outside world. And I would say it's got a lot of benefits as far as it's allowed them to remain so stark and so chazak over the years. But at the same time, they haven't had the effect of being important to the nations explicitly or really making a great enough impact on the Jewish world around them.
I think everybody agrees that having a house, right, private property, is not bigoted or racist. Everyone okay with that? Maybe we should all just live in a park together. Central Park, you guys vibing on that? What do you guys say to the Chevra around the world? Should we all just live in a park together? What do you say? Just live in a park. Private property? Bigot! Bigot!
We're in Hashem's park.
Bigoted! You have a house? How dare you? With a door? That locks? That's so bigoted. Right? How dare you? So I hope that humanity is sane enough that having a home is okay and is not bigoted and is reasonable and logical and actually necessary. Why? Because you having a home means that there's a place that this is like your headquarters. It's private. And that at the same time where you have a private place and that you build and it's like a sanctuary of Kedusha and you have mezuzahs on your doors and you're connected to Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You also walk out of your house and you go into public domains. But at the end of the day, you come back into your home. So I would expand that idea, is that at the same time you have to have a kind of headquarters of consciousness and then go out and share with other people and then come back into a private domain. And it's interesting, we speak about, though, an Erev. An Erev is actually about inviting people into the home. It's about making one giant private domain. It's not about making more public domain. It's about bringing people into a sacred private domain. That's the secret of Erev. It's about making us all in a sacred space together. So I think that's the idea, is that you have to have sacred space, and then you go out of the sacred space and you share, and really the idea is that you're bringing that light outwards, and ideally you're creating a bigger Erev. You're making this giant Erev. Let's just see a few more lines here. So Rav Nachman says, as I call asfarim eitz lekaloi, v'haya malig aleim. This is all before. This is when there's a lack of emunas chachamim. He's making fun. Kamaisha kosev asoy sfarim harbe ein kates v'lag harbe. Dahainu shemalig al ribui sifreim. V'azai kulam kaloi eitzla. They're he's not even being goyris the sfarim. When he does tshuva on this, and he starts reconnecting himself to the Masorah, he's now writing books. He's writing responsa. All these books that before did not register as being relevant to him, now all of a sudden are illuminating. Everything is going to be according to the machloikis. He starts thinking about the machloikis. What were the points that are being made? What are my responsa? What am I answering? What am I responding? v'loy ba'ofen acher. Why did they respond to me in this way and not in a different way? He's actually hearing the points that are made. He's hearing the points that are made. So all the Chevra here, there's Baruch Hashem, a lot of people writing. It's so beautiful to see people. That I would ask, which points does a person specifically agree with? Which points do they disagree with? Can you delineate the points? Let's say people disagree with certain points. Can you delineate those points? And then we could respond to those points. Sometimes the person just like, Isaiah 53. So, okay, what about Isaiah 53 would you like to present? And how was that specifically relevant to something that we mentioned? Let's actually have a real discussion where we're going through the points that were made in a logical fashion. That's what Gemara learning trains us to do. That Abai is actually answering Rava's question precisely. And if the Gemara feels that he didn't, the Gemara will pipe in and say, that wasn't exactly the question that was posed. Or say, oh no, Hachi Ka'amar, this is what he was really saying. And they're actually trying to get to the points that were made. So once somebody actually responds to you, this is arousing tshuva in a person. Because he actually has to think about, okay, this person responded to me in this way. Was I off? Maybe I was off. Maybe I need to re-examine something. And that's why a healthy machlokes brings a person back in tshuva. He's responding to the points that are being made. He's thinking about them. And this is mesakin emunas chachamim. And the machlokes would not have happened if there was a emunas chacham. So it brings me back into the emunas chachamim. Because the chacham are going to give him very good things to think about. If you go back to Moshe Rabbeinu, he's going to give you some very good things to think about. Why is Mashiach called the Pele Yoetz, the wondrous advisor? Mashiach's going to give all of humanity, including everybody here listening, so wonderful. He's going to give each person very good points to think about. I see points about the rapture. I see points, he's going to give very important points to consider. Now, where is your source material? How do you know that source material is true? Do you have evidence that supports it? So Mashiach is going to open up these conversations. The way that the Sfarim speak about Mashiach is not like all of a sudden, like, ta-da, he's just here, and the world just magically turns into like this godly universe. It's like there's a journey that Mashiach comes, and the consciousness of dialogue. It says that Mashiach changed the world through his speech. He speaks to people. And through the dialogue, people start thinking about the world. And they start engaging in actual, real communication. As opposed to speaking to each other, they speak with each other. The world has become so tribal. Just like, I have my talking points. I'm not even going to listen to your talking points. I'm just gonna yell them in the cleverest and loudest way possible. What about hearing the points that are made and then responding to those points? When a person does that and they actually encounter a good response to something they thought about, it makes them think. They do tshuva. This is the tshuva we're talking about. The ali day shepogim b'emunus chachamim. Ulefia tshuva. We'll just finish this little section here. Lefia machloikis. Keinu choizer v'shav el emunas chachamim. He starts coming back into the Masor of emunas chachamim. V'kamoi kein nischadesh eitz lo sefer. He starts writing books. Ki choizer v'nechshav be'einav masha hayi betchila be'einav koloi. V'chein b'kol pam lefia machloikis kein atshuva sheshav v'choizer lemunas chachamim. U'kamoi kein nischadesh eitz lo sefer acher. He starts writing these books. And he has a response, and there's a response to that, and there's real dialogue. Something which he wasn't even hearing that point of view, now he's hearing it, and now that sefer starts illuminating to him. And now he's writing books. This is what it means. V'sefer kosev ish rivi. Beautiful. Eov says, let the one who argues with me write a book. So, for all the Chevra, I've seen so many beautiful, wonderful points being shared here. Some seem to be disagreeing. I would suggest if you could write a book about your thoughts. More than a one-word response. Write a book. Write a real discourse about what you really believe in, and then we could respond to that. And I'm not saying that myself, I'm saying that from the prophet Eov. If you accept Tanakh, then you accept the words of Eov, the great prophet Eov, and he says, let the one who disagrees with me write a book about it. So that might mean there's going to be very long comments. I'm happy to have that. But write a book, write a real discourse outlining it, exactly what you believe in. I would suggest try to do it without AI. Actually write the words yourself and let it be developed. Once there's this dialogue now, we're going to be writing books. We should be zeicha mamish, my dear friends, we should be zeicha to hear opinions, to share, to have a back and forth dialogue. B'siyat d'shmaya, we should be zeicha to all the brachos of the Torah. We should be zeicha mamish, that we'll see Mashiach Tzidkeinu in the bin beis hamikdash b'mhera v'yameinu, amen ve'amen. Oy yahu Hasheinu, v'to yakeinu, manayim goralei.